Welcome to the fellowship for everyone in the room now and watching this later. We are all the fellowship of the Learning, Activity and Analytics, and I will present shortly this evaluation research we did on our method that is used to co-design learning analytics and connect it to the learning activities. My name is Marcel Schmitz from Zuid Hogeschool in the Netherlands. And I'm an external PhD student at the Open University of the Netherlands. And I'm supervised by Maren Scheffel, which is of the Ruhr Universiteit Bochum, and Hendrik Drachsler, which also is at the Open University in the Netherlands, but also in the Goethe University in Frankfurt. My colleague Roger Bemelmans is also from Zuid Hogeschool, and we authored this article. This evaluation study, and now I'll go to the next slide, is part of a bigger PhD research that I'm doing, which started with the current situation. We designed some kind of learning activity. There's some behavior on it during the runtime of that activity. And after that, the course is done, we have a reflection of students, of teachers, and we do a redesign. When we started this research, we found it important to see if we could do something with the reflections during the study. So within the 10 weeks that a course is done, can we then gather data through learning analytics, analyze it, give it in a dashboard, and can we act upon that? And we are then the students and the teachers. That's the start of our research. We did a lot of things about that. There were several studies before this one, a literature study. We did some requirements, checking with the students and the teachers. And as a third study, we had a very big study about using a learning analytics dashboard in practice. And we used it with teachers and students. And we learned a lot of things about that. I've got references of the previous studies as well for people that are interested in reading about them. But the most important thing for the article we are discussing now is that in this third study, we learned that at the point where we're trying to design our learning, there's a pivotal point. You should think about learning analytics. You should think about the data that you're want to measure at the point when you design your learning activities. And we looked in the world of science and we looked in the world of practice, and we didn't find an actual tool that helped in thinking about learning analytics at the point where you design these learning activities. And that's where the two studies erupted. We did a design-based research study in where we built the fellowship of the learning activity and analytics, and I will shortly introduce that to you. And we did some experiments on that to see how that could be evaluated. And that's where the article I am talking about is on. Very short about the fellowship of the learning activities. It's based on the design cycle for education, which is a cycle for education to design education in a more hybrid form than previous. Here also, the article is connected, and we build it for the square. There's a nice video of it, which I hope you will see afterward, but there's too less of time to see that now. Some central points of the game. There are several roles where you can play with: student, teacher, but also all kinds of advisors that you actually want to have at the table if we had the luxury to design all our learning activities with a fellowship, with great people to design them with. We have several pedagogical and educational visions implemented, but you can also make your own one. Zuid ICT is the one that we made for ourselves. We have interaction cards between students and teachers, students and material, students and the learning environment, etc. There are learning enhancing technology cards like Moodle, but also like concept mapping tools, etc. And there are what do we want to know cards, which especially is the data and bringing the learning analytics, the metrics, who elaborates more, what is the use of resources. So there's all these kind of cards that help us in a structural way to do a learning activity. First, we set out the interactions, like from teacher to learner, etc. We add then some technology, video clips, for instance, or interaction booster. And then we see, what do we want to know? So who takes the initiative in the discussion between the students about a specific topic? How is the engagement of students during the interaction booster? And these yellow cards are then bringing the learning analytics into a learning dashboard, for instance. So you see here an example of this FoLA square. And what we did in for this article is that we did some experiments with that. So we used this FoLA square method, and we were researching, does it change the awareness of learning analytics, and does it change the knowledge about learning analytics? In our experiment setup, we did 7 co-creation design sessions with the method to build a discussion group, which is some kind of learning activity at our university for course A, and 7 for course B. And in these 14 different groups, we had 5 or 6 participants. That was due to COVID. I had to change the number of participations with several roles. So we had a student, a teacher, a study coach, and some kind of advisor present, and a game master, which then led the discussion amongst these people to come with great learning activities. Before we did such a design session, we had a pre-questionnaire about technology acceptance, and we used UT-AUT2 for that. We also had some images of the board, and we had a post-questionnaire. Plus, we had some recordings of every session from every participant. And in the analysis, we used this pre and post questionnaire to look about the acceptance. And the audio recordings were transcribed, coded, and the epistemic network analysis was used to see what topics are covered during the discussion of this co-design. So if you then look at the results, if you use this UT-AUT2, this acceptance model, you get these kinds of figures, which I'm not going to explain now, but this is pre and a post questionnaire with all kinds of indications on the performance acceptance, the effort acceptance, and expectancy of intention to use learning analytics. So we asked them, are you then now willing to use learning analytics more than before after using the method? So on a performance base, we saw the slight rise. On an effort expectancy, we saw an increase, but the teachers showed a decrease. So they thought it would cost them much more effort than before. But there was although there was a high initial intention to use learning analytics already with the group we used, there was a growth that we showed in the post questionnaire. So there's a slightly more acceptance of using learning analytics after using this method. If we then look into the epistemic network analysis, and I just can only show a few of them because of the time, but you can do all kinds of evaluations with them. What we see here is a collaboration analysis where we see which roles interact with each other. The thicker the line, the more interaction is present. So a teacher and the advisors did more interaction than, for instance, the game master towards the learner. All the dots are the several sessions, and this is the mean average of that. And this gives a view on how people collaborated during these co-design sessions. But you can do several other views. We took a framework, the Drachsler framework for learning analytics. We took topics from that, and this is a view where you can see which topics were covered during all 14 sessions. So you see on the right side, internal limitations and external limitations, which are important in learning analytics, aren't covered that much. And data and the objective for learning analytics are covered a lot and covered a lot together. So the thicker the line means how much are they covered together. The thicker the dot means how much is this topic covered in the discussions. This is based on the roles. So every role, and this is the mean of the roles, you can see if a game master uses this differently than a study coach or than a teacher or than a student. This again, a similar view, but then from sessions. So you can see that during all the sessions, the combination stakeholders and instruments are not that much. And so all these kinds of information can come out of these kinds of analysis about what topics are there and are used. You can also compare them amongst each other. So we see a comparison here between the course A and course B sessions. And in the left side, we see the difference between the separate analysis. So we see that in course A, there's much more talk about data and stakeholders than, for instance, in course B. These E&As are very interesting to talk a lot more about, but I feel available to ask me about after this session. Again, this is the last comparison I show. This is then on a role base. So if I look at all the teachers, and you see in the similar dots that for every teacher there's a session, but the view that I've chosen is now the mean of all the sessions. We can see that the teachers talk more about objectives and data than the students. It's not that the students are not talking about, or the learners, as I stated it here, are not talking about anything. You can see that in the bottom right, that they have the topics where they talk about and where they co-design actually these learning activities with. Yes, we have used students in that. If we then look at the conclusions, we saw that these kinds of analysis advance our understanding of FoLA square, or about this method. It gives us a potential how to evaluate and compare these kinds of methods, which wasn't actually out there yet. We saw a slightly growing acceptance of learning analytics after the co-design of FoLA square. And by that, we are establishing a foundation for more evidence-based design. And yeah, it supports continuous improvement of learning analytics, bringing into practice, because these were all teachers, students, advisors that came out of practice. If there are more questions, there's an open repository of the cards available, because there's open research that we do, of course. There's a website as well where you can look and see if you have a personalized version of it. And yes, I'm always available for questions, demonstrations, or more talk about this E&A analysis or the acceptance analysis as well. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Marcel. So, any question?
Acceptance for sure is very important. So to stimulate acceptance in the teacher is very important to use the learning analytics. But then what the usually teacher look at is also the easiness of use of learning analytics, and overall the dimension that they can, the information that learning analytics can bring to them. So do you have any hint from your workshop discussion about the expectation of teacher about learning analytics in this sense?
Okay, thank you for the question. Yeah, very much true. Awareness is one thing, but then actually I'm going to use it is another thing. We also saw positive reactions after designing with the method. So both students and teachers were very enthusiastic to actually going to use learning analytics and also in practice based on the data they selected now in this learning activity, and based on the ideas they have that could bring back feedback to them out of this data. But then we actually did also try to do this in practice in using these learning activities and then enabling them to use the learning analytics. And then the busyness of the day obstructed some of them in doing the right steps in gathering the data. Because there weren't always automatic systems available, there weren't always direct data collecting systems available in our institute that then could supply them with this direct feedback and information on it. And yeah, that's also a thing that we have to establish yet. that if we have this inspiration that they want to use it, which it can get by this method, that we also have them the actual execution of this data, actually the data process ETL pipeline, which is needed to then come to these dashboards. And yeah, we're still working on that, and that's still a big work in progress.